For as much as video games have advanced from 2D pixel clashes to Hollywood rivaling extravaganzas of storytelling and character building, there's something about gaming as an inherently nerdy venture that makes gamers themselves produce some of the most well thought out and interesting fan theories in all of entertainment. Just look at literally any sequel to any franchise. We really love a good bedrock of plot potential, and we love pulling it apart, adding to it, pulling it back apart again, and restitching it along the way. With that in mind, this generation's games have given us some outstanding titles that are absolutely worth playing on their own, but take on an even greater appreciation once you factor in a few fans' opinions. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 fan theories that totally change your favorite video games. Number 8, one Doom theory to rule them all. In the lead up to the reboot of Doom, its writers went through multiple iterations on how to continue the franchise, before deciding, screw it, let's just be really self-aware. That didn't stop Waypoint's Patrick Klepek connecting all the various titles together anyway though, and to be honest, having them all work as one is even better. Going with the idea that all the main Doom games exist in one timeline and 2016's iteration wasn't a reboot, the first game sees a more standard Marine working for the Union Aerospace Corporation. They fight their way through hell, defeating the Spider Mastermind, only to get told that Earth has been invaded by demons anyway, and they must return to cleanse the world of Hellspawn, turning into the campaign for Doom 2, Hell on Earth. Doom Guy does so and then happily retires, only for Doom 64 to happen and a demon-infested Mars needs his help once again. Our Marine then heads to Mars, cleans house, and, as I quote, as the only Marine to endure the slaughter, decides to remain in Hell and ensure no demon ever rises again. From here, the newest Doom contains a codex entry stating that this Marine, the very same one who's been through so much across the various campaigns, chose the path of perpetual torment, seeking vengeance against the Dark Lords who had wronged him. It makes sense then that the version of the Doomslayer you're playing as is the very same that we always did, albeit now a version completely devoid of humanity, instead seeking to only rip and tear until it is done, reclaiming his own armor at the beginning of the campaign before tearing a fresh wound straight through Mars and Hell all over again. Number 7, Final Fantasy XV has a split timeline for both fans and newcomers. Final Fantasy XV's story is a spectacular mishmash of underused plot potential topped off by a pretty emotional finale, but user Dvorn2016 works up a theory that explains precisely why it's a Final Fantasy for fans and newcomers. Stating that the theory is a little out there, Dvorn says that 15's events parallel those of the original Final Fantasy. In that game, you defeated the evil Chaos to remove him from time itself, saving the land in the process. Assuming that our band of heroes are the latest incarnation of the Warriors of Light, the name given to the protagonists of Final Fantasy I, when they defeat Ardyn and he mentions being erased from history, the ending flashbacks and scenes of Noctis and Luna being happily married now exist in a different timeline. One where Ardyn never existed. This ties in directly with the game's adverts and messaging, as if you know the franchise's history, you get a far more positive ending. Noctis and Luna are happily married and the other party members would be alive in Alticia for the wedding itself, as opposed to the canon ending where everyone dies and these scenes just take place in the afterlife. Further confirmation comes from a loading screen mentioning Ardyn's usage of time loops to deceive the party, something that Evil Chaos also did, meaning that if this is all true, it's a whole new way to appreciate and look at Final Fantasy XV overall. Number 6, Pokemon Go ties directly into the main games. Despite being a mobile app initially divorced from battling and trading, Pokemon Go always had far more in common with the main games than you might think. This theory, first posited by Japanese Twitter InkVirtue, suggests that all the events of Pokemon Go happened before the handheld entries, and before the often mythologized Pokemon War. The latter is a fan-made idea relying on things like male NPCs tending to be very old or working in military positions, children being allowed to roam free, your best friend being an orphan, and why there are more gyms and hospitals than movie theaters or entertainment outlets. In this older timeline, weakening Pokemon before capturing them hadn't been thought of yet, and trading wasn't possible because the machines to do so hadn't been invented. You can also catch the likes of Aerodactyl, Omanyte, and Kabuto, where in the other games they're acquired from fossils. Lastly, this kind of explains why trading and battling took so long to get added. Niantic were intentionally showing the passing of time and the proliferation of the populace as Pokemon trainers. It's totally not that they just forgot to include key features back at launch. Number 5, Stardew Valley is embroiled in a vicious war. Way to flip the otherwise idyllic and village fair-fueled world of Stardew on its head. Redditor the Porkroll has pioneered a fantastic theory that completely inverts the carefree nature of Eric Baroni's gorgeous farming sim, instead positing that it has more in common with something like This War of Mine. He suggests that the wider world of Stardew is embroiled in a vicious war between the Ferngil Empire and the Gotaro Republic. Kinda like Rebels in an Empire, it's very Star Wars. This is known through various dialogue interactions with a character called Kent, but also through the price of a can of cola being 75G, despite a working wage in the village being 5G an hour. From there, the pork roll expands this economic disparity to reframe everything you think you know about Stardew Valley. And I quote, "It's why someone always buys your produce, likely because it's the Ferngill army. It's why you can sell a single potato for 80G. It's why villagers ask you for specific crops at exorbitant prices, they just can't get them anywhere else. It's why Linus is broke and no one is willing to shack him up. It's why no one's fixed the Calico Desert bus because everyone's too preoccupied with spending money on food. It's why Joja people always manage to find you when you pass out. They're probably on the hunt for suspicious enemy agents during the nighttime." Thinking about the tiny town of Stardew as some sort of Rogue One-esque rebellion faction is certainly interesting. It kinda lends weight to why they'd have a Hunters Guild and a cave for training with weapons too. Number 4, Battlefield 1 was a VR simulation set in 2143. You can almost apply this to any multiplayer shooter, but it fits a little better with Battlefield 1, especially considering the exorbitant amount of times that you'll die in any given game. The theory from Redditor Box77 goes that you're not actually playing a World War I setting, but a virtual reality recreation of it. Hence the voiceover from the weirdly well-spoken and almost futuristic female that narrates each match. This voice can be heard on the various menus, informing the user of real-world events during the operations mode, and even makes Battlefield 1's modernized HUD elements make a bit more sense, at least aesthetically. Lastly, the opening mission sees you jump from body to body, almost as if you're actively jacking into a variety of soldiers, all attempting to overthrow a never-ending force and all to get across the futility of war, steadying your resolve as you inevitably then fling yourself into all sorts of other game modes with reckless abandon. Oh, and what year could the real Battlefield 1 experience be set in? The theory humorously suggests 2143 in reference to a potential future Battlefield sequel that's yet to be released. Here's hoping that after the categorical misfire that was Battlefield 5, fans can finally get an installment they can love again. Number 3, what Inside was all about. The whole point of Inside's existentialist imagery is to invoke all manner of interpretations and thought, especially after that particularly brutal ending. Some even think it's a visual representation of a body rejecting a cancerous tumor, but there's one theory that feels a little more contemporary. Framed around the notion of societal oppression, it's easy to view the boy as an active, youthful mentality, a new perspective on any predicament. We collectively investigate an industrial environment, slowly unraveling what appears to be a system of rulers, controlling forces and watchful eyes all around, until eventually coming across what we might call a prisoner. This blob of people lives only to serve the higher-ups, those either benefiting financially from its misery, the complex you're in is clearly a business, or merely for the fascination of the middle classes, seen as they ogle through the glass at its current state, rather like how many of us are guilty of just observing homelessness or destitution rather than doing anything about it. Once you provide the much-needed spark for a revolution, removing one of its shackles, the resulting chaos is the perfect visualization of a long-awaited insurrection. It's a brutal, ugly, violent, and momentous feeling, one where you help turn the tables on your oppressors in a sequence that perfectly evokes being part of the mob mentality, causing wanton destruction despite only playing as one moving entity. In the end, you break free and bask in the sun, only to realize that earlier in the game this sequence was foreshadowed by a museum model also showing sunlight casting down on a beach. Perhaps your newfound freedom is in itself shackled by location or factors larger than yourself. Perhaps you're forever inside the larger framework that is life, but for that moment, reflecting back on what you've achieved, at least it feels worthwhile for now. Number 2, there's a reason Agent 47 looks different in Hitman 1 and 2. Were you one of the many hardcore fans that took an instant dislike to the younger version of 47 we saw emerge alongside IO Interactive's reboot of the franchise? Well, fear not, because if this theory is true, the real 47 is still out there somewhere. This theory states that after the events of Blood Money, when way more serviceable clones were suddenly part of the canon, the end of Hitman Absolution sees the real 47 go into retirement. Providence, the top-tier secret company pulling all the strings, have previously acquired 47's DNA and begin recruiting the newly cloned 47 that we see in players in the 2016 and 2018 release. By that token, this new version is younger, with the initialization he's given at the beginning of the game being less a flashback and more a test to see if he can actually use 47's skillset. Granted, the way Hitman 2 goes kinda disproves this as we delve into 47's past, but to be honest, I'm always game for some implanted memories. Number 1, Nathan Drake died in Uncharted 4. Many fans thought in the run-up to Uncharted 4 that Nathan Drake was always gonna bite the big one, hence the fact that it's called A Thief's End. Turns out though, Naughty Dog might have hid his true fate under our noses the whole time. According to Game Rant's Dalton Cooper, the very reason we get a happily ever after ending despite the game being otherwise full of misfortune and dour circumstance is because Drake actually perishes when falling off the cliff towards the end of the game, and everything we see thereafter takes place in the afterlife. To be honest, it kinda works. Think about it. Before Nate's fall, Elena had walked out on him. He's told Sully to take a hike, and Sam had been revealed as lying about everything. As Cooper states, following this fall, suddenly Elena is somehow in the exact right spot to save him despite having no way to do so. Then Sully turns up and saves the day, day, despite also not knowing where Nate was. Everything from here on out is pretty much the afterlife. The rosy everything's okay anyway, calming the tensions between him and Elena, Sully coming to the rescue, Sam making it out alive and taking over his line of work. Nate having a kid? Dalton cements his theory by questioning the design of Cassie Drake's bedroom, which, and I quote, doesn't have many modern knickknacks, and also shows the daughter playing the same Crash Bandicoot level that Drake did at the beginning. Being that Nate doesn't know jack about computers, it makes sense that he'd imagine his kid playing the one level of the one game on the one console he had a pretty recent interaction with. And that's my list. Let me know down in the comments which mind-blowing fan theories kind of made you reconsider games that you totally love. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, and I'll catch you soon.